History laid the foundation
that informs our conversation. Welcome to the classroom.
from the church to the streets and even in the suites and all around the world.
I'm gonna keep it real in the classroom.
Fannie Lou's classroom.
Fannie Lou's classroom. Fannie Lou's classroom.
Good afternoon. It is 12 o'clock Central Time, and you know what time it is. It's time for Fannie Lou's Classroom. I am your host, Reverend D.A., and excited to have you once with us again on this week. We're excited about our conversation on today. As you know, for the month of June and July, we are really trying to have conversations around issues that are directly tied to our elections that are be coming up in November, our midterm elections, issues that are important to you. And so we've had a series of those, and today's conversation topic will be around the cash bail system that impacts many of us, particularly in Black, brown, and poor communities. So we have an awesome and amazing guest that's going to be with us on today. But as we normally do, we want to step into Fannie's class and to make sure that we just kind of center ourselves around the conversation we want to have on today.
In Fannie Lou's classroom.
Now don't you dare be late. We need retention, not detention.
To be materially poor or impoverished in this nation is to really be rendered invisible and disposable by many people, and particularly those who are elected and appointed officials who serve our communities. And this poverty takes forms in many ways, and we see it at every level, whether it's in our neighborhoods, our cities, our counties, our state, or even the nation. It really leads to persistent high rates of poverty, as well as institutional problems that we typically see that is done by way of public policy and laws that directly disproportionately impacts Black, brown, and poor people. And so for us, it's so important for us to make sure we stay in tune to when we say poverty and who poverty impacts and affects, right? So sometimes we think about somebody who's just not doing what they need to do to pay their bills, to get a good job, when the reality is there's a lack of a living wage in this country. You talk about the feminization of poverty, the ways in which women are most impoverished that impacts children. And if you deal with the intersection, we can then talk about how it disproportionately impacts Black, brown, and trans women as well. And so poverty is something that has so many levels to it. As we think about Fannie Lou Hamer, right, she certainly understood what it meant to be materially poor, because she was not poor. She was poor materially, but not spiritually. She was not poor as it relates to intellectualism. She was very intellectual. She had a well-developed and informed theology of what she thought about God, what she thought about Jesus, what she thought about land and labor and peace and justice. And so we have to begin to have these conversations around those who find themselves impoverished. And some particular areas that we want to focus on today will be cash bail, but that is just tied to, as we'll unpack later, that's really tied to some other things. It's not just about cash bail system, but we want to talk about that specifically because that is also rooted in the powerful really lording over those who are less empowered economically, right? Because poverty pays for a lot of people, especially when we start talking about prisons for profit and we start talking about the big business of the criminal injustice system, which we'll get to in a moment. But for Fannie's class, I want us today to really think about, when we hear about what it means to be poor in America, when we think about those who are impoverished, not to label and to be able to have a stigma or make them somewhat, what I would say, to say they have some kind of pathological problem why they're poor, because it's very systematic, right? It is very intentional why people are poor. And if you look at the latest 2020 census, you will see more families are slipping into poverty, which more families are becoming more homeless. And so it's a very intersectional problem. So I want us to kind of focus on that as we have this conversation around the cash bail system with an amazing guest that we have with us on today. So I just want to kind of put that out there as we begin to have this conversation and know that it's a larger framework. It's not just about cash bail, but it's directly tied to so many other things. And we say poverty, let's think about who we're talking about. And usually it's those who we claim who were the frontline workers during the pandemic that we lifted up, that we celebrated, but yet we don't offer health care coverage. yet we don't offer a living wage, yet we offer no relief for child care. So we want to think about that as we talk about cash bail and who's in the system. Just keep in mind that these are real human beings, real human experiences, and part of an institutionalized problem we have here in America with, as we talked to Dr. Green not too long ago, a few weeks ago, about the gap, the wealth gap, and what really creates that. So I'm going to turn now from Fannie's class to our wonderful guest on today. We're going to just jump right into this conversation. I'm excited to have Mr. Mark Walters Jr. with us. I'm going to read his brief bio. And of course, as always, every week, you can go into our link. Is that right, Candace, our executive producer? You can go into our page and you will see Mr. Walters' full bio. So Mr. Mark Walters Jr. was born in Monterey, California. Okay, we got a Cali dude in the house. Okay, but you grew up in New Orleans.
I did.
In NOLA. Okay, so he was born in Cali but grew up in NOLA, and that's where his roots were established. And I would like to hear more about that as we go through the program. So Mark's life experiences have made him well-rounded and able to connect with individuals from different cultures, backgrounds, and professions. Okay, so he like a Renaissance brother. He knows about culture, backgrounds, and professions. Okay. His passion is assisting persons to reach their maximum potential while allowing them to create a vision for their freedom. Okay, so you help folks be a part of their own liberation.
Yes.
Okay. This passion has led Mark into the work of community organizing, service facilitation, leadership development, as well as mentorship. His current role is Luke 418 Bail Fund organizer with Faith in Texas. However, he has been organizing for change for the past 8 years now. His focus has always been on de-carceration through strategies, informed policies, effectual implementation. Mr. Walters wants his legacy to be he lived out his guiding scripture, Isaiah 58:12. We're definitely going to get to some of that. Your bio alone kind of lends itself to some questions I want to ask you. But for now, let's just jump right into this. Let's just start, first of all, tell our listeners, what is the cash bail system? What is it? How does it function?
Well, the cash bail system is basically a system that determines who is able to get out of jail prior to their day in court. So basically, if you don't have enough money to pay your bail, then you're going to sit in jail until it's time to have your day in court. If you do have that money, then, of course, you're going to be able to bond out and fight your case from the outside.
And so is this just related to particular types of offenses, or is it any kind of offense that's so I guess people want to know, because I think some people thought that perhaps cash bail was just for those who committed like felonies, like a murder. So can you clarify?
No, this is all charges. So as soon as you get arrested and, they bring you down to the county, within 24 to 48 hours, they're supposed to determine how much your bail amount is going to be, whether it's cash or whether they trust you enough to just come back and they give you a PR bond, which is coming back on your personal reconnaissance.
Okay. So, Brother Mark, you got a lot of good information. I want you to pull your microphone a little close, because you got some good info. You got some good intel. I think this is important, because I think what happens oftentimes, as with a lot of our issues in our communities, right, we can feel it's just us isolated. Mm-hmm. Like my family member or even myself, we're having this battle with, we don't have cash to get out, so we're just languishing right in jail. So I think it's so important to have this conversation and to understand how the political system works, right? So when we have elections, these are questions we ask those who are running for office. Yes. Like, how do you feel about cash bail? What are your thoughts on that, right? So I want to make sure everybody hears you well.
Yes, ma'am.
Because this is a very important issue, because we have a lot of us who are most impacted by that. So we want to talk about what it is, but also how we're able to navigate, negotiate that, and how do we call for an end to it, like some things we can do. Yes. Okay, so I think you answered this part, but when is cash bail assigned? So I get arrested. Mm-hmm. And then?
So legally it's supposed to be anywhere from 24 to 48 hours.
Okay.
That you're supposed to go in front of what they call a magistrate judge, who's the judge that actually determines what's your bail amount going to be.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I think you just you started leaning into this. I don't know if you can give us some more. And I think this is important too, right? Because oftentimes we'll get calls here, at the church. Somebody been arrested. They're like, can y'all go get them out? Call, the DA. I'm like, well, wait a minute. It's a process, right? So we know it's not a in my opinion, it's not a just criminal justice system, right? In that it disproportionately impacts folks that look like us, but it is a system, and it's good for us to know how it works, how it functions, so we can best, negotiate and navigate that. So you told you get arrested within 24 to 48 hours, you should go before a magistrate.
Yes.
And is that when you get your bond set?
And yes, that's exactly when you get your bond set. So there are a couple different types of bail.
Okay.
A lot of us are familiar. A lot of us below the poverty line are familiar with the bail system through the bail bondsman.
Okay.
Which it charges you 10 to 12% of the actual cash bail, but you're beholden to the bail bondsman, which comes in the bounty hunters and stuff like that, because they need to get their money back.
That's right.
But for people that are of more affluent class, they deal more so directly with the county. They go down and they pay the full cash bond amount, and as their case gets resolved, they get their monies back less an administrative fee.
And so also what I'm hearing in this is that this is also another form of weaponizing poverty, right? Yeah. And so I'm going to read something that I found when I was Googling something, and I want to get your thoughts, and we'll kind of shift back into, because I think it's also to what you just said, right? If you're at the poverty line, below the poverty line, then you have to go through this other system that can really be even more of a burden.
It is.
Right? Up and against, if I have the resource, I just go down here and handle my business, right? So this is what I read. The U.S. has the highest incarceration rate in the world, almost 5 times the average of other wealthy countries. Because we're so civilized and, we civilize the rest of the world.
Right.
The mass incarceration rate costs at least $182 billion every year, including $80.7 billion for public correction agencies, $63 billion for policing. That is ridiculous. And I know a lot of that is, militarizing, the police. And then you have, since 1976, federal spending on prisons increased tenfold to $7.5 billion a year. And I imagine that's when we saw the increase in the prisons for profits, right? And how they, CCA would send out the letter to the governors, sign this letter saying you'll have this number of prison beds filled, et cetera, et cetera. I'm assuming that kind of pushed that number up is what I imagine that's part of it. We can talk about that. And then it goes on to say the number of sentenced states and federal inmates grew from 188,000 in 1968 to 1.5 million in 2016. 2/3 of these inmates are people of color, while Native Americans are incarcerated at a 38% higher rate than the national average. And of course, you talk about Native Americans and Black folks. When you put the population overlay on that, we're still going to surpass, that number. So talk to us then about, as we look at, you talked about how this process goes. You get arrested, 24 to 48 hours, you go before a magistrate, you get your bail set. Depending on your resources, you either go through this alternative system or you can directly, I guess, negotiate your release to come back, right?
Yeah, or you just stay in.
Or you just stay if you can't do that, because you may not even be able to afford the bail bondsman, right? Exactly. And I think that's what we're going to talk about, is some people can't even afford that, right? So talk to us about, are you aware if there are rates I was trying to read this question we have. Are the rates the same regardless of race and ethnicity? Do you see a difference when you go before, when you go before the magistrate? Is there a disparity?
There's most definitely a disparity. Like you said, 2/3 of the population are people of color, and that's just the case. Even in a sense of when we actually post bail, there was an occasion late last year where we actually posted 2 bails. Exact same charge. One was of Caucasian descent, the other was Black. And our counterparts' bail amount was $5,000, and the Black person's bail amount was $25,000. Wow. Yeah, exact same charge. And if no one had pointed it out to me as we were doing the process, I would have never paid attention to it, just because honestly we just already know that people of color are going to be the ones that need the assistance the most, and are going to be the ones that are most criminalized and incarcerated. So for you just do, well, we're going to have a more of a challenge because it's us, but to hear it, And
the
to
same,
see it,
and to see that I'm a person, and that's not even double.
No.
That's more than
Yeah.
double, right?
Yeah.
And I think it kind of continues to go back to this idea, this notion of institutional. When we say racism and institutionalized,
It is.
this is what we mean. I often tell people, many of our institutions, organizations in this country are definitely upheld and rooted in white, terror and white privilege, right? And the work, that's why what the work you're doing is, I think, is so important, right? Because we have to begin to interrogate that, and that's part of what you're doing when you say, I'm witnessing 5,000. Now, come on. That's definitely strictly related to race,
Yes.
and it's related to who has more value
Yes.
in terms of the body.
Yes.
So this black body is not as valuable as this white body, because I'm going to give you 5,000. That's 5,000 even negotiate than 25. You know what I'm saying?
We're still 3/5.
You see what I'm, like, seriously, right? So I can probably get $500 somewhere, but 2,500.
Yeah.
That's different.
Yeah, that's very different.
That's very different, right? So so I would imagine you see that in the system, and how that can make you feel, and how that probably fuels you, right, to continue to do the work. So talk about the consequences of the cash bail system on our community, the Black community.
I'll start with a tangible example.
Okay.
There was a young lady who had been detained for 90 days at Lou Sterrett. And her bail amount for the 2 charges was $2. And I may date myself, but I remember $2 to get you 200 penny candies. And she was detained for 90 days.
Wow.
And the thing about it, if it hadn't come on our radar, she would have still been sitting in jail. But some of the other collateral consequences is, when you think about it, let's say, for example, on a job, 2 days, no call, no show.
Right.
That's automatic termination.
Right.
When you get incarcerated, the job is not the first place you're trying to call. You're trying to call somebody to let them know you're in jail and can you get me out? So you'll deal with the job piece after. Unfortunately, let's just say you do have the resources to pay the bail bondsman the 10, 12%. By the time the process actually, goes through and everything, you've lost your job. And if you're below the poverty line or right at the poverty line,
right,
you don't have a savings. So that starts that cycle. So you get deeper and deeper in the hole just off of, not being able to, bond out of jail.
Right, and it's all, which is about the intersectionality of it all, which goes back to pay equity, goes back to living wage, right? Where I can't even bail myself out, let alone, to your point, I probably don't have savings, so I lose this job, and then it doesn't just impact me. Am I taking care of family? Do I have children? Then the rent's not going to pay, so then we get put out. Do we become home? So I think it has a domino effect, and I like the way you give that very tangible example, because I think people have to understand that this is not for us to judge, right? So I think sometimes we go to, well, what did they do?
And it's innocent until proven guilty, what it's supposed to be.
Right.
But if I'm actually doing time, if I can't afford to pay bail, I'm actually already serving time.
Right. But my point is also this, right? That even if you're guilty, there's still an inequity in how this process works. Because so we got to deal with the root cause instead of us looking at trying to make people pathological or trying to point to behavior, right? Let's point to, where is the system broken?
Yes.
Because we're not saying people should, if you did something, if you go through the process, like if you're proven to innocent, but it's enough to charge you, we're not saying don't go through the process. We're saying, where's the equity in that process?
Exactly.
And it's clear that it's not there. No. And I try to steer people to, no, let's deal with the system first, right? Let's not just go straight to behavior. So I think that's where we can get tripped up oftentimes. So with that being the case, well, tell me this, because I'm so interested in this Luke 4:18, live free. I want to hear more about that. Tell us the work that you actually do to bail people out.
So I've been in the role as the bail fund organizer for the past year. And what we do is the first 3 Fridays of every month, we go down to Lou Sterrett and we post bail for individuals who unfortunately can't afford to pay bail. Individuals reach out to us a number of different ways. The jail people in jail have my cell number, so they're able to call me from jail at no cost to them. Then the family members may get in contact with me. They look us up online. We even get referrals from the public defender's office and sometimes the DA's office, and we make a determination on who we're able to bail out within our monthly cap. In the first 3 Fridays, we're down at Dallas County posting bail.
What, how often?
the first 3 Fridays of the month.
First 3 Fridays of the month.
Yeah, we were there last Friday. We're going to
Yeah.
be there this Friday, and we're going to be there on the 22nd.
So how many people would you estimate? So you've done this for the past year?
Yes, for
So-
the past year at this consistency.
To being consistent with the first 3 Fridays.
Yes, ma'am.
So how many people would you estimate you have been able to free them up from the burden of being in the system?
Wow. So for me personally, in the past years, maybe between 50 to 60 individuals, but the bail fund has been operating for maybe about 4 years now.
Okay. And you have a sense of, because I'm curious with the money is like what had to be to allow people, because I'm always looking at, is it to show that the people are if you couldn't bail them out, that this amount of money, you have people languishing in jail for this amount of money. You know, I'm just wondering if you have an idea of how much money the bail system has has done.
In the past year, we've probably spent almost $200,000 on 50 individuals, which 100 of that was earmarked for Christmas bailout we did on the 23rd in December, where we earmarked 100,000 and was able to get out 10 individuals.
Yeah, 'cause I think that's pennies compared to
Yeah.
you know what it costs to house folks in jail.
Yes.
So I just want to point out that it's not
cost
It's
effective.
not right.
It
That's
is
the whole
not.
point. So, because I think which gets back to my point that we have to look at this. What is this really about? Why are we really having this issue, and why is disproportionately affecting Black and brown and poor people?
Well, let's just call it spade.
Call
spade.
it. That's why you hear.
This is still slavery. The realization that we have to come to is that the prison system is operating extremely successfully, because it was set up and designed to do exactly what it's doing now,
Right.
and they're operating effectively. However, it's just on us to operate more effectively
Right.
in undoing the system that they're continuing to reinforce.
And so part of this obviously is doing that, what I would call the acts of compassion, which is bailing people out. The
Yes.
cash bail system is, to me, an act of compassion, right? So talk to us a little bit about, because we already said and we're clear that this is a systematic problem. Like, it's systemic,
Yes.
right? So what are some of the policies or laws that you are working on, or the organization is working on, to really correct the systemic problem?
So understanding that bailing people out is not sustainable for us as an organization, our ultimate goal is, right now in the moment, is to decrease Lucere's jail population by 25%, which equates into 2,300 or so.
Okay.
When we are successful at getting Dallas County to commit to this de-carceration plan, they're going to have to close one of their towers, because Lucere has 4 towers that it operates. And the one tower costs Lucere or Dallas County $30 to $50 million a year to operate. So we want you all to close that tower and redirect that $30 to $50 million to capacity building for individuals that are, below the poverty line. We want you to spend that money in the community and not spend more money on law enforcement or prison or public safety, how we call it now.
Right.
Because that's not being effective. We spend all this money on incarceration. However, crime has not gone down. So what does that say?
Right, and to your point, how do we radically reimagine, quote unquote, public safety?
Yes.
Right. Yes. So we won't go down that, because that's a whole nother conversation, right? Just because I always say, if you start in the wrong place and you don't course correct, you'll end in the wrong place. And I think about policing in America in its roots, as we know in slave patrols. The notion of the whole idea is to really regulate the Black body in all its ways.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
It's this ongoing white, and what I call it, this white aesthetic gaze on Black bodies, and it just manifests different ways over time. And I think now it's done in the criminal justice system, right?
They're getting
And
bold about it now.
I mean, and why wouldn't they, since you had a president, right, who, really, he like, I'm taking the leash off.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, you get out there. And so I think So it's important for us to understand it's not just, to your point, that that's not sustainable. So it's about what do we do to really, like what we're saying, course correct. And some of that is to tear down and build back up.
Yes.
Right? And where you can course correct, you do that. And it sounds like the de-carceration plan is a way in which you're trying to course correct the incarceration. So tell me can you tell us what does that mean when you want to implement this de-carceration plan? Like what does that mean?
Okay, so some of the language that we drafted in a resolution at Faith in Texas that we're attempting to present to Clay Jenkins and Darryl Martin at the end of this month is, certain charges should not even they should be ticketable offenses. And there are things that individuals in decision-making capacity can do immediately to make that. There are certain offenses that, Dallas police should just give a citation for, but they're going to keep bringing people to jail. The sheriff can also say that, these particular offenses, we're not taking them in, we're not booking them in, they're just examples like that. So there are many different ways on things that can happen, but the de-carceration plan as a whole, and I've done this in Louisiana, but what it looks like is when you actually decrease the prison population and you redirect that money into the individuals that are going to be released as it relates to transitional employment, transitional housing, mental, physical, drug treatment, and things like that, and you operate with those individuals in a comprehensive manner, then they're less likely to return to prison. And, that actually they carry that over into their network, and it just kind of creates this ecosystem. But on the other side, it saves so much in spending, in negative spending, as it relates to how counties or parishes spend their money.
Yeah, and I think that's so well. I'm gonna try to tie these two things together. So the Luke 4:18, I picked up on that. And so, that's one of my favorite, scriptures as it relates to when people say, why do we do justice, For me, it's Jesus and justice, There's no separation from church and community, separation from the body and soul, that God cares about what happens to us between Sundays, Yes. So part of Luke 14, that first one which speaks to this is when Jesus said, the Spirit of the Lord is on me, He has anointed me to preach good news to the poor. So I tell people that means we got to free people up from the bad news of poverty and exploitation. Exactly. And that's what it sounds like the work that you're doing, You're saying, let me tell you, there's something else out here we can do. And I like this idea of this decarceration plan, and that you're saying that part of that is to redirect, to say some offenses you shouldn't even try to arrest people for. It's ticketable offenses, So, and I like the fact you're putting it in writing, because I think you can't leave it to somebody's discretion. No. Because the implicit bias and the straight up racist people will always say this is a arrestable offense, Yes. So I'm curious, can you maybe give us one or two offenses that right now you can be arrested for that the organization is proposing policy-wise or change-wise, that this should be a ticketable offense? Like, what are one or two things? You
shouldn't be arrested because you owe a ticket.
Amen. Not that I have a ticket, but in case I have one, don't pick me up.
You shouldn't be arrested if you owe a ticket. Marijuana, and I know we're in the church house. Just be.
But we haven't. This is Fannie Lou's classroom. She spoke truth to power. It was people power. She was about the people. So come on,
marijuana is pretty much legalized all across the country, and you still have people languishing in jail behind those type of charges, and you still arresting individuals like that for those type of charges. So, and another thing, mental health, that they shouldn't go to jail. There's a place that is designated for individuals that need support in that capacity, and the jail is not the place for it.
And to your point, that's where you redirect those millions.
Yes.
Into mental health, like real.
Yes.
Mental health services that can really be transformative for people, Okay, that sounds good. So with that being the case, I heard you say you're looking to present that by the end of this month?
Yes.
So how can people, what kind of support do you need for that? Because if you're going to the commissioner's court, I know that oftentimes it's really good when you can have people of power behind you. So let listeners know if they want to be a part of this particular movement to get this, or where can we find the plan, one, and two, what can we do to be a part of this?
Okay, so it's in the final draft draft stages.
Okay.
They're actually they've did the initial draft. The team has did the initial draft. So now they're kind of stripping it down into talking points to make it more palatable for individuals in the community.
Yes.
So that is going to be done next Tuesday. We have not. We've gotten communication from Darryl Martin and Clay Jenkins. Clay Jenkins is the individual that we're having challenges getting a date because it's election time. So our hope is to have that. We've decided we're just going to give you a window, and that's going to be the second to last week in August. This is the window. And preferably it would definitely need to be in the evening because we want people in the community to be able to attend. And, so once we have that date, then I'll be able to share that. But in the interim, because when individuals ask how do we get involved, the first thing I personally do is invite them to Freedom Friday at Lou Sterrett because we're there so consistently on the first 3 Fridays from 11 to 3 p.m., and we have a table set up and everything on the ramp of Lou Sterrett. It might give us problems after this because I know y'all have a wide audience, but it's going to be all right.
Well, no, that's even better because here's how I feel about many spaces that it's the people spaces.
Mm-hmm. It is.
Right? And we have to reclaim that and not keep giving our agents everything. We can't go here, we can't go there when it's like City Hall. It's the people's house.
It is.
And if you're an elected official, you working there because we put you there.
Yes.
And I think it's important that we invite people, show up. Mm-hmm. Come on this ramp. You can come here.
Yeah.
Right? And so I like that. So I hope people making note of that. Freedom Fridays.
Yes.
First 3 Fridays of the month from 11 to 3.
From 11 to 3, right on the ramp.
Right on the ramp. I'm sure we can't miss you.
You cannot.
But I like that you have to really go to the seat of power, right? You have to make yourself visible. Because really, if you don't, this whole cash bail, a lot of people probably have never heard of it, don't understand how it works. And again, it's this kind of the rendering of invisibility, right? Of people because nobody's thinking about it, it's something about the justice system and how we initially think about it when we hear and how our minds may go to the negative up and against. Well, okay, but let's do with the real evil.
Yeah.
Right? And that's the system. And to your point, that was doing what it was designed to do.
Exactly.
Right? And I guess we kind of stick with the Michelle Alexander kind of trajectory like do Jim Crow, right? It's just another iteration
of slavery.
Right? So, okay, so let me ask you this question. So, what is the impact of the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals ruling on the cash bail system in Dallas County?
So, we're talking about Texas Senate Bill 6.
Right.
Basically, what that is, in essence, is making it more complicated for community bail funds that operate to be able to bail out as many people as they attempt to bail out. However, there is a faith-based cover, which actually covers our bail fund. But we do keep copious records just in case they try to change that. We have everything in
copious. Come on, right. That's it.
But it also affects individuals that are deemed violent offenders. It makes it more difficult for them to even get a bail. And so that is just another tactic to be able to keep people in bondage. And I thought Louisiana was a monster, but man, Texas is scary.
Listen, Texas, when they said the Lone Star State, we mean that in a number of ways.
I do. I see that.
So, yeah, and I think, and I often tell people, right, that, we have the Bible Belt, and I tell people Texas is the buckle, right? And Texas suffers from still, because see, a lot of this is also rooted in, quote, unquote, this claim on God, right? And it's this theological defense system that sanctioned enslavement, black codes, post-Reconstruction, lynching, right, as well as Jim Crow. And so I think that's what we have in Texas. So they throw religion on top of it, but it's really like white Christian nationalism is what it really is, right? Yeah. And it's so dangerous because it's this ideology of what can we do to put policies and laws in place that disproportionately impact black and brown poor people while it maintains, right, this domination system that white people benefit from. Yeah. And we're going to throw a little Christianity in there on it.
Yeah.
So they got the flag with the cross right next to it. or own the flag. And I
Yes.
think that's what makes Texas, in my opinion, an extremely more unique than most states, southern states, right? And so God bless you, because we do work here. We do a lot of justice oriented work here at the church, and we're out here, and to do this work in Texas, we need to get like 5 stars. I mean, because we're doing it against a lot of great odds, right? And a lot of it really is for a lot of people rooted in a very much warped theology. And you probably notice this as you do this work, because so for example, like that Senate bill, you don't think half them senators in their mind are God-fearing people? So now you're going to get a bill that makes it harder for a community organization to bail out maybe a mother for Mother's Day so she can be with her children because she simply doesn't have the money to get out.
Exactly.
Right? So you understand? So I'm saying we have to really look at what we're up against in the state of Texas, right? And then how we have to deal with that and negotiate and navigate that. So I like the fact that it's faith-based. Yes. Right? Because I think
we sure need it.
Yeah, hello. We wrestle not against flesh and blood. Okay, there's some real wickedness, right? And Walter Wink calls it like this domination system where it's not necessarily individuals, but it's so ingrained in the structure and institution, and it has to be because the people who started are dead and gone. But we still have the same problem, right? So I think the work is so important, and I like the fact that it's faith-based, and I think that Senate bill just speaks to, once again, right, the still-out defense system is still very much intact. And I think the work that you do in its own way, particularly the bailout, and then you're talking about the de-carceration plan, these are ways you begin to tear down that still-out defense system that has been in place for so long. And I think that's so important. But I just want people to know what, like the counter to that. You're doing good. Well, we're going to counter it with shut it down. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And so that's why I like that you're on this, you're right there on the grounds doing this work and not backing down from that work. And I want people to know about it and how they can also come and support. Because I think the more people we have, the better, right? Now I know everybody's not going to come out. No. But I also know when you have more people, it's less likely to be picked off. Doing this is a handful of people, right? And I also want to tell people, don't wait till it's your loved one locked up, can't get out, then you want to call and ask everybody to come and get them out. So I'm saying, let's be communal. Let's have the spirit of Ubuntu. You are because I am because you are. We all in this together. So if you locked up, can't get out, that means I'm locked up and can't get out. Exactly. How can I help you get out? Exactly. Right? So I just want to make sure people are clear about how they can join this fight, right? This movement to really uproot this system that really is an evil system and how it disproportionately impacts Black and brown and poor people. So let's talk about, I think you may have talked about this already, but I want to expand it maybe a little bit beyond Dallas County if you want to talk about that. But what are some of the other current bail reforms? We heard about Dallas County because you're doing that. So what about are there any best practices, maybe some other states who may have had cash bail and they've been able to successfully move from that to another form of system?
That's a continual fight. I can't name one right off the bat. What I will say is some states are taking into consideration, and Dallas is supposed to be doing this, but I don't think they are, where they actually assess people's ability to pay. And when we talk, I took a glance at the form that they use here in Dallas, and some of the questions were just like off, just things, the type of questions they were asking didn't really make sense. And, you think about that from a person who a lot of us don't even budget. So what do you mean? What is our budget?
Right.
Yeah. Like
right.
What do we have in savings and what kind of collateral we have? I'm like, why do you need all this information to determine somebody's ability to pay bail when you know that eight times out of 10, almost 90% of the time, if you're Black or brown, you're going to the bail bondsman. But there's some states that actually are doing it effectively as of late. I'll name Louisiana. I think that Georgia may be on the cusp of something. I know the Northeast and the West Coast are actually, on the cusp of some things, but I think that we're still trying to figure out, how does this look when we talk about bail reform? Because there are some that are extremely on the side that we don't need bail at all. Some people are like, okay, well, what charges necessarily need bail? So it it's just kind of all over the place. But there are some states that are kind of attempting to work it out.
Trying to be a little more progressive in that area. So, and I think we talked to your point. We talked about this, and I'm wondering, how can this portion be addressed? So this is what we've read in some of what we pulled out of some of our research. It says high cash bail amounts are regularly set for even nonviolent arrests. 80% of the people involved in the criminal legal system are really rendered indigent, right? They don't have an ability to pay for even the necessities in life. So how can we address it's almost as likened to, I guess, somewhat so, the sentencing disparities that have, I guess, in recent years have been, somewhat rectified. I don't think completely until I think still a lot of work to be done there. But can you talk about the high, like to your point, 5,000, 25,000. So do you know if there's I'm sure there's a range evidently why that was set. So what needs to be done in that regard to pull that in, I guess, a little bit more for same offenses? Because that seems like a broad, like 5 to 25 seems broad to me. So is that part, are you all addressing that portion, like how the range of the cash bail or the range of the bond, I guess, that can be set?
Not in this particular moment. The focus is that de-carceration because we think that if they decarcerate, they won't have that big a problem. But as it relates to ranges, as it relates to nonviolent offenses, it's a lot of times drug charges and stuff like that. When you think about it, those bonds, or I've seen bonds that are at $1.5 million, and then I've seen some that over $2. So it's just like all over the place.
Yeah,
but that's intentional because the bulk of our income as a country comes from incarceration,
right?
And then when you think about it from the bail bonds perspective, the bail bonds owners are the ones that are funding these individuals' campaigns. They're funding the sheriff association and everything like that. So it's in their self-interest to keep the
exactly.
But the weird thing about that, I've never seen the bail bondsman exchange hands with the county, and I'm there 3 times a month, and we're kind of peeling hundreds off to get people out sometimes. But I've never seen a bail bondsman exchange. I don't know how that works. I just see them come there with a folder, and they get some paper back, and they're on their way, and that person gets out, but they've gotten cash money. So I don't know.
Right.
We're still trying to figure that out. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you just bring up the point that it's a system, right? And it's profitable.
Yeah, very much so. Just not for us.
Right.
Yeah.
So to your point, because some bail funds do fund campaigns. So what does that say?
Yeah.
And I think that's where, as we think about nearing election time, that those are the kind of things we have to really pay attention to, right? So we should have maybe more of a laser focus on when someone's running, who's really sponsoring, who's endorsing, who's making commitments, right? I think that's what, because you have to understand what that connection means. Nobody's giving money just because, right? Yeah. You fund campaigns, and politicians take your money. Those who run for office take money for a reason. That's the political system that we operate in, and it's just important. How do we make sure we're selecting the right candidate that has our best interests? And I know you're looking at me like, who was that? Where do they exist? That's how you're looking at me, brother. So what you? but I think that's what I'm glad you pointed that out, because people have to think about that.
Yeah.
Because that's real.
It's hard out here.
Yeah.
And even I don't ever think we'll be in a position where we can raise someone up from the ground. Well, because I know in some cases I've heard that you have to have a certain amount of resources. I want to say $250,000 to run for office.
Well, let me say this. So it costs money to run for office. It costs money to be in this day and age, and maybe in ages past. It really was whoever wants to run. Anybody can run, but can anybody go in and really run effectively?
True.
Right? And so oftentimes we can't afford to run. But we want that position. We want that positional power, that proximity power. So we run for office, but we don't necessarily have the resources. And it begs the question, do we as a people see the importance of, hey, let me put some money over here in this PAC, $5 a month, $10 a month, so that we can raise somebody from the ground up. So when they get in office, they understand, oh, I'm beholden to the people. Because if I don't show up for the people, they're going to come down here looking for me.
Exactly.
But we don't do that. Right? So we kind of give our agency and power over. So then other people fund those campaigns and they're beholden to them.
Yeah.
Right. So I think we can't, it's a matter of, do we have,
Can we make the shift?
can we make the shift? Can we mentally, and it's like psychologically, like, does this make sense? And understanding, giving that money for like a PAC, you may not see it in your lifetime, and that's okay. Because you're benefiting off of somebody else who did something who didn't see it either. Exactly. Right? So Fannie Lou didn't see all this that we have privilege to.
Exactly.
She died, right? Before all this really manifests into what we see, all the avenues and pathways that she's clear for us. So I think, to your point, it's a very mental shift that requires some change for my brains to be released and to understand that we need to learn how to trust each other with money.
Yes.
And then we need to have integrity when we do set up organizations. Absolutely. We need to also excellence, integrity, honesty, transparency, right, and shared leadership model, like an Ella Baker model. Like, we have to learn how to trust and really be in community with one another. Because I think we can, if we can make, to your point, that shift. Yeah. And it has to start somewhere.
It does.
And I'm hoping that, something will be coming up in the city real soon that people can learn about, that they can be a part of. So I'll put the teaser out there for now. But something we're trying to do just that. Yeah. Because if we don't do that, we'll continue, 20 years, 30 years now, sitting having the same conversation. We have got to learn how to tear down these systems that are death-dealing to us and build those things that are life-giving to us. And that requires work. And that requires not a lot of on social media work, like this underground work. Everything doesn't need to be on social media. Exactly. Everybody don't need everything we doing shouldn't be out there. Exactly. Some of it's called, groundhog work. You don't come above ground till it's time. And so I think, to your point, though, I think that's so important. This is just a example. The cash bail is just a small example that's tied to, as you have already mentioned, so many other things. Your ability to have a job that pays a living wage, to save money, right? All of this is interconnected. So this has been a great conversation, a good start to a conversation. I know that we're getting toward the end of wrapping up our summer series that's designed to have multiple conversations around issues where we can connect that to November elections, so people can get to think about this now. So when they start coming around with their platforms, go back and listen to all the Fannie Lou Classroom podcasts and say, well, now wait a minute. Who supports them? Is it a bail's mama supports them? What does that mean? Have they said anything about cash bail? Have they said anything about living wages? You're right, so people can have these conversations and think about it as we go into election season. So we usually wrap this, what I call the more formal part of, even though we're informal, but more the formal part to talk about an issue, because I also know that people are more than their vocation, they're more than their profession, they were well-rounded individuals. And, I love to hear more about who people are. So now we shift to what I call like a parlor conversation, where we're just kind of more laid back. That works. And some we throwing questions that you like rapid fire, but it's just us having a conversation. So we'll kind of shift into that now. So I want to go back to New Orleans, because I wasn't going to let that go, because I know New Orleans in itself is a very unique place. It is. And so just tell us a little bit about growing up in New Orleans. I want to hear more about your experience, what got you on this track, right, of wanting to help people to reach their, what I call God-given, God-vested potential, right?
I've been in New Orleans since a year and a half. I was only born in Monterey by default. My mom and dad grew up right next door to each other on a one-block street in the Lower Ninth Ward, so I was supposed to be. Okay. Right. So I think I remember a time where, New Orleans has always had, its challenges, but pre-Katrina, New Orleans was extremely fun. It was always something to do, even if you didn't have any money. It was always community. I remember playing football on the block, and my uncles and everybody be outside just kind of chit-chatting and everything like that. I remember selling World's Finest in the little corner bar that my uncle owned and stuff like that. So it was a lot of fun. I grew a lot. Especially in my when I turned 16, I moved my dad. You know, that's when I really grew a lot and became more independent and just really was able to, you know, just see New Orleans for all the greatness that it is in spite of, you know, whatever challenges. So, you know, I always have this special place for New Orleans. That's my roots. That's my blood.
We love NOLA, but it hasn't been the same since Katrina.
It has not, and
you know?
honestly, you know, I went back a few months ago. I try to go in, you know, every so often because I still have my mom and dad there. But it really doesn't feel the same. The vibe is not even the same.
And I often tell people, you know, they want to go in, gentrify, push people out, but what they don't understand, NOLA was NOLA because of the people. You can't recreate that.
You cannot.
Because that's spirit,
You cannot,
right?
yeah.
That's who we are. That's
Exactly.
who we be. And when you take us out, it's over. You can't manufacture that.
No, you can't.
And God gave that to us. You can't take that away. Okay, so tell us also, you know, what do you do? What brings you joy? What do you do to have fun?
Wow. So love cars. So I will take a ride in a minute. You know, I do public transportation now, but I'll do a tour road and just go take a ride, you know, because I love to see new places. I love adventure. I get my Diego on. I'll ride around till I get tired and then GPS my way home. So, yeah, I love to just be outside. I love music, all types of music.
What's your favorite?
Wow, of course, R&B is my favorite. I even do classical. I do some country. I'm still kind of gravitating to that alternative rock. Of course, you know, old school. My favorite group is the Isley Brothers.
Oh, come on, now, what you know about that Isley Brother? You too young to know about that.
You know, so it's just and I love movies. So anything that just piques my imagination, you know, I'm all for it.
And so, and because of you work for the Luke 418 Bail Fund, and you have your Isaiah text you stand on, like, what is your idea of a beloved community? What's your ideal world? Like, you have to engage, if you have to enter Afrofuturism into this, what does that look like for you?
Wow. Well, first off, that wealth would be a choice. You know, that individuals wouldn't be forced into poverty. Not everybody wants to be wealthy. But at least give them that option and that choice. So for me, beloved community is back when you could walk down the street and you might say a cuss word and the neighbor might beat your butt and it beat your mom home. Right. So I remember when, you know, people, we took care of each other, you know, and if I'm honest about it, you know, I think that there was an element to segregation. And I know that may be not the best thing to say, but I've asked a lot of, you know, my older friends in the 60s and 70s, and I would ask, like, what's the worst thing you think that happened to us? And they said desegregation. And the first time I heard it, kind of blew me away. I was like, I thought that was a good thing. It was like, and we thought the ice waters was a little bit colder. You know, we stopped owning businesses. We stopped taking care of each other. We stopped teaching each other. So for me, I think that seeing an element of that and experiencing it, you know, in my lifetime would be awesome. That would be the beloved community I'd want to see.
Yes, and I think that's beautiful, right? Because it's about a beloved community. Is how do we all have what we need to survive, not just survive, but to thrive, right? To live in abundance.
Yes.
Because that's not what we live in now. We live in extreme capitalism and extreme individualism.
Yeah.
Because also what you're talking about, too, is what does it mean to be in community with one another?
Yes.
To see ourselves as we're all in this together and
Yes.
there's no separation. And to your point, right, and I think I talked to some elders about, you know, what was life like prior to, you know, desegregation, and for them they said, well, we have to, and we meaning us younger folk have to understand, it was never about wanting to be with the white people, right? It was about we want equity, right? And so it was more about, well, give us the money. We don't just have to go to your school, give our schools the money, but they wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
Is it, no, you come over here, which means we lost our teachers. Teachers lost their jobs. Principals lost their jobs, right? So a lot was lost, to your point, right? And I think because it wasn't integration, it was assimilation.
Yeah.
And that was the difference. And, you know, and Dr. King, toward the end of his life, even admitted.
It was a revelation moment.
Right, he was like, I went the wrong way, right? He said, I'm afraid I'm integrating my people into a burning building. And as he made comments, right, well, it doesn't matter if I'm arguing for, you know, to sit this lunch counter and we don't even have the money to buy the burger.
Exactly.
Right? So I think King even understood, and I think that's why him and Malcolm started doing more of this, right?
And that was the demise when they saw that.
Oh, without question. His last speech in Memphis, that night in Memphis, he really called for economic boycott and a really radical redistribution of wealth. That did it, right? Because now it's like, oh no, wait a minute, we were okay. We were talking about, oh, let us sit here in the buzz, but now you're talking about the money, right? So, but yes, I think beloved, and that's what King strove for, right? This beloved community where we all have, access to these life-giving, life-sustaining resources in places where I think. For King, I also think it meant for churches, for our communities to be places where peace, justice, love, hope, and liberation can really be lived out. Yes. Like we become centers where that can happen. Because it can't happen in what we have built now in America because, well, it was, rock from the start. I mean, let's be clear. We were born in a culture of violence, and that culture of violence stays with us to this day, whether it's physical or structural. And what we've been talking today is about the structural violence in America that we're still trying to uproot that thing in so many ways. So we thank you so much for being with us today. I think you offer so much invaluable information so people understand what cash bail system is, how the system works, how we can be engaged, not only the acts of compassion you're doing, but you're also talking about, now we're talking about acts of justice by going to the county and putting forth this plan that we can be a part of too, by joining you any first, second, third Friday from 11 to 3 at Loose there on the ramp. They're at the seat of power, really doing the good work. So we thank you for your service and your commitment to our community. This has been a wonderful conversation. We hope we can come back and talk a little bit more about what we have to do to really I'm going to keep saying deconstruct and tear down that which is harmful to us. And so I didn't do my shout out to my engineering crew. We don't have our sister Rochelle with us today. She's pulling double duty today, but we have Brooke who ran the whole show by herself today. So shout out to Brooke. She handled the business. And of course, we always have our Fannie Classroom team members. We have Cheryl Prelow who does so much with our podcast. And of course, our executive producer, Candace over off in the cut. I guess she's taking pictures, filming, doing her thing. So listen, thank you for joining us on this week. And I think we have maybe a couple of more weeks before we wrap up our summer series around how we try to connect issues that impact us every day. So when election time comes around, we're more keen, we're more in tune to what our vision for community should be and how we can match that up with a candidate's platform to see if you should vote for them, whether they're your color or not. Amen. So let's be clear about that. Just because you black don't mean we're going to vote for you, because if you're doing the work of the white folk and the evil empire, we're not voting for you either. So we want to make sure that we're clear about that. So join us next week, 12 o'clock noon. Make sure you like us on Instagram, like us on Facebook, like us on YouTube, subscribe and share. And we look forward to seeing you here next week in Fannie Lou's Classroom.
From the church house.